Dear students, welcome to Darasa Online. My name is Mr. Darcy. I teach English language. The lesson is on writing a curriculum vitae. Curriculum vitae is commonly known as CV by many people in our societies. So if you talk about CV, people can easily understand differently from when you say curriculum vitae. But when we are speaking and or writing, we normally have to use a formal expression, and of which it has to read the two words all together, curriculum vitae. So the lesson is on curriculum vitae. What is it? Curriculum vitae is a formal document that briefly defines a person. This document is said to be a reliable source because people use it when they want to know about a person. So, as we are in a society, we need to define ourselves. We need to tell who are we, and especially if people want to use us in different jobs and or in different things that they need a person of a certain caliber. So in that, we are forced in one way or another to know how we can write our own CV. This lesson will be guided by our question that reads, how can you write a curriculum vitae? So, when we go about how you can write a curriculum vitae, we'll need to go through some certain aspects and or some certain divisions, and of which those parts will give us a knowledge on how we can finally write this document. When I'll be taking you through this, as we are trying to answer this question, it is my expectation that at the end of this lesson, you should be able to write a curriculum vitae of your own once you are asked to do so. So, how has this curriculum vitae been divided? Curriculum vitae is said to have been divided in 7 parts. Or those parts, you can sometimes call them areas. And as we'll be trying to define and as we'll be trying to describe those areas, we'll come to see what in particular each area contains. And these areas that I'm trying to refer here are, 1, you talk about the personal particulars. We'll discuss and we'll see it later, what is it that it contains inside. So I'm simply now trying to mention them. So the first part is personal particulars, and which will be followed by educational background. And thereafter, we'll see the working experience. After that, there is a part known as interpersonal skills. That interpersonal skills is followed by the interests, the hobbies. After hobbies, we have referees. And finally, we'll have a declaration. So these are the areas that we are going to focus our discussion as we'll be trying to understand how we can write a curriculum vitae. The areas of divisions, if you have to write them, are you talk about personal particulars, educational background, working experience, interpersonal skills, interests or hobbies, referees, and the last one is declaration. And the last one is declaration. So these are the areas that when you know how to describe and which information contained in each of these areas, that will be the time when you'll find yourself being able to write a curriculum vitae of your own. How do we write this? These are written in orders as they appear. We'll start with the first, followed by the second, the third, until we come to the last part. Let us go in one after the other. Personal particulars. Which information do we think it has to be included when we want to talk about personal particulars? Actually, personal particulars in simple language is one needs to know who are you, and maybe your historical life, and especially the person who writes that curriculum vitae. The information that we expect to see, or the information that expected to be contained under this part, it has to start with the names. The names of the person who is concerned. And how do we organize these names? It has to start with the last name. So you can decide to write the last name, and or you can even decide to write the surname, the name that is above O. If people are referring you by three names, then that last name is the one that has to appear here. We'll see it. And what comes after the surname is the other names. So as I said, some other people are referred by three names, and others are referred by two names. So if your name, let's say, is Furahia Ramadhani Idi, then we expect that that last name Idi to be seen at this point here. And those other names like Furahia Ramadhani, they have to be seen at this position. Or maybe I should go with examples altogether so that we can see how we write this. Now I said, for instance, your name is Furahia Ramadan Idi. Then as long as the last name there is Idi, and so we expect that one to be the surname. The other names would be contained by those other two names, Furahia Ramadhani, and therefore, how do you go about writing it? Then it has to be Furahia Ramadhan. So one of the names should be initialized. And so we have to initialize the second name, the name in the middle. Other people, they might think of extending it, and so they would start having first name and the middle name. But to make the matter short, we simply put the two names together. And what comes after other names? You talk about the place of birth. Where were you born? Now it depends the place where one has been born. And for instance, this person was born in Morogoro. The followed information under personal particulars, it is the age, how old this person is. Maybe you might be, or you might have 27 years old, which it has to be followed by this other information. Talk about your citizenship, nationality, as we are Tanzanians, we can write in that place. And which other information? You talk about sex. So it depends whether the person writing is a male or a female. And you put it there. And the other, and which at this particular point, as for today's world, we think would be the last, you talk about the contact. You leave alone things like your religion, your tribe, and some small those other elements like marital status, because those seem to be very, very personal. Now, under contact, there are three pieces of information that we expect. We expect to see physical address. We expect to see a telephone number and or an email address if one has it. The reason as to have all those is that the one who is going to receive your CV should think on what could be the easiest means that he or she could use to contact you. Should he or she contact you physically and or through the use of physical address? Or the quickest one is through the phone, especially in this today's world of globalization. But again, as I said, they can as well use email address. So here we talk about physical address like PO Box 34, Morogoro. And or we talk about the telephone number, and you have to write it there. Something like that. And email address. Like now, since we all know that these email addresses that are written in small letters, I could have my email address be written in that form. And this is all about personal particulars. Now, some people might decide this subheading, personal particulars, to be written in capital letter, and or you can write it in small letters. And others, they would prefer it to be underlined. But all those, they're trying to show how attractive it has to appear. So it depends how you can make that decoration. That is all about personal particulars. You go to part 2. Part 2 from our list is educational background. Educational background. At this area, the information that we expect, it all has to do with the level of education that you have gone through. And the level of education that we are talking are primary school level, secondary school level, to mean O-level education and A-level education, and higher learning institutions. And this stands for colleges and universities. And how do we organize them? Of course, they have to be written in a descending order. That you start with the highest and you finally finish with the lowest. If the highest level of education that a person has, it is that of degree, then it has to start with the degree, and so it comes with the second level, which means the advanced level of education, go to the ordinary level, and finally that of the primary level. Now, how do we organize those? It depends. A person might wish to write those education level in form of sentences and or group of words. And another person might decide to write the same information within a table, and which within that table there will be some columns indicating different information. And that seems to be the preferable one, which most people normally use it. And let us here try to use the same, which is preferred by most, so that we should look the same. imagining this is our piece of paper, so the first column would stand for a year, followed by the name of an institution, that could be the name of the college or the name of the school. Which institution have you gone to? And then some other people sometimes they think of writing the level of education. The level of education. And they talk about the award. What kind of certificate one received. And thereafter now, you have to have the rows. As I said, the first row under the educational background, it has to be occupied by the latest level of education that one has undergone. Imagining that the latest level of our education, or the latest level of education, this person who writes this curriculum vitae is university level or a degree, then will depends on which year. Maybe this person had his or her degree in 2018. When did he start? Maybe he started somewhere, sometimes 2015. 3 years course. Which institution? You talk of University of Dar es Salaam. I'm writing this DSM standing from Dar es Salaam simply because of the space that we have it here. But actually, you are supposed to write the whole word, Dar es Salaam. Though some other people, all this, they could simply acronymize it as UDSM. It's okay. The level of education, we talk about what? The degree. The award, it now depends on what kind of degree did you undergo. The award could be maybe the LLB. Now this is the highest level of education this person attained. Now you cannot go to this level if at all you haven't gone to the advanced level of education. So maybe we could think about the years when this person went in the advanced level of secondary education. Thinking about completing sometimes May 2015, counting back is 14, then it is counting back, then it is 13 when he started from 5. Which school? Maybe you went Jitegeme Secondary School. Jitegeme Secondary School. Level of education, advanced level of education. Shortly, people call A level. A level education, and the award is that of Advanced Certificate of Secondary Education Examination. Again, of course, you cannot go to this advanced level education before you had the ordinary level. Now, think about, did you go to the same school? And if not, then you have to think, when did you finish the O level? Maybe it was 12, 11, 10, 9. So you started from 1, maybe, sometimes at 2009. Which school? Call it Juhudi Secondary. Juhudi Secondary School, maybe. And the level of education is ordinary level education. And the award one received there, again, it is of Certificate of Secondary Education Examination. And the last level of education, which at this point, it could be the first that you attain, that is of primary level. And so if you graduated standard 7 at 2008, which means you started standard 1 sometimes at 200, that you started your primary education at 2002. Which school? That should be Pugu Primary School. Of course, the level of education, it is primary education. And the certificate that you had is that of Certificate of Primary Education. Now look at this table. It had 4 columns. And the rows, of course, it depends on the level of education that you have gone. But remember, as I said, the level of education to be written in descending order, starting with the highest level. Now, some other people might asking themselves, but that probably he or she has gone in one of the other colleges, had his or her certificate of, let's say, computer, a certificate of accounting, a certificate of procurement and supply. Those cannot be included under the education level. We simply call them other trainings. So a person might have undergone many, many more other trainings, but those are not levels of education. Remember, these are what we call formal education, that a person has to go under a certain system which it has been organized and agreed by the government and or by the system itself. So if you have undergone with those other trainings, again, if you have, you can record and or you can place them in the same way, just like what and how we did it here. When did you have such a training? In which institution? Of course, you forget about the level of education, you definitely have to go to the last column, and which is the award that you received. That one has to come immediately under education level, and of which it becomes part and parcel of this area. That is number 2. The third area, it is that of working experience. That either you have been employed in one of the organization as you are writing this curriculum vitae, And so it could be seen as one of the added advantage for you to be employed at a place where you send your CV. How again do we write it? How can you write it? It also can be written in the same as how we did when we were writing education level, though the information contained in those columns and rows could be different. Dear students, here we need to write different working experiences that you had. If, for example, you happened to be employed in one or two places as you are writing this curriculum vitae, how will your curriculum vitae be developed? You'll start again drawing your table, and of which it has to contain the columns. And which information should we fill in there? The first column, it has to stand for a year, the duration, how long have you been employed? Then the second column, it should be the name of the place where you have been employed. You talk about maybe the organization or the office or the institution, it depends. Where were you employed? And then what followed is the position that you have been employed for. And the last column, you talk about the duties and or rather the responsibilities that you were performing or that you were given when you were employed at that organization and or in the position that you have been employed. As an example, let us think of maybe you were employed in two different offices before you write this curriculum vitae. And as I said, you have to start with the latest. What or which organization are you employed or are you doing currently, or what was the last? So maybe you were employed somewhere December 2018. You were employed on December 2018 to date. In which organization? Maybe the organization that employed you was, you can think about it like Chuma, Chambers of Law. Maybe we will think about this. And the position, you are employed as a secretary. A secretary come cashier. And what are the duties that you were assigned? Now, at this point, you have to talk about which responsibilities were you given? What are you doing there in the office? Maybe you could think about this person to have been employed to maintain the database of the office, one of them. Or maybe to keep books of accounts, or accounting books. And also to network the office. Networking the office is something to do with maybe taking information and or communication system from inside to the outside. Like, for example, picking up calls and or making calls to different offices where they work together, and or could be the customers and or such related activities. And you can mention as many responsibilities as you do. And just after that, maybe you could think about in which other organization were you employed. Maybe you were employed in one of the company as an office clerk. We talk about M&G Enterprises Limited. This is the organization and or a company that you have been employed. When it is maybe as from November 2018 up to early December. So you can talk about December again 2018. You were shortly employed there. And the position is an office clerk. Then what were the responsibilities that you were performing? Maybe one of them was to collect letters from the post office. Collect letters from the post office. Another one is maybe to update the diary of different office attendants, and many more. That could be an example. So, maybe a person can ask a question like, I'm just out from school. I haven't worked anywhere. Which information should I have under this position? Which information should I have at this area? Now, some people think it is only when you are employed that you could have an experience and or what. Remember, when you are at school, you sometimes, somewhere in the middle of your semester, you might have gone in one of the offices doing what we call field training. That field training, it could fit here as one of the working experience. Because what were you doing there? Actually, you were taught to do one or two other things on how those people do in the office. That is also an experience. So if you don't have one, you can include it there. But how? You write in the same way. That which year you did your training, you write it here. And it's not the whole year. The month is, you categorize it. Which organization, which position, and the duties you are assigned to. But again, if you have never gone to the field, when you are at school, you do what we call project work. And which this project work, it requires you to go to the colleges, to the institutions, and to government offices, and whatever, to collect data, and as you are trying to write your field research. So that project work, or that field work, or that research paper you write, it is one among the work, the experiences that you get, and of which it can qualify you in one of these different positions or different jobs that people are doing. So don't sometimes say that I don't have a working experience, so I cannot include this in one of my CV presentation. That's not. Think about all those that I've mentioned. Working experience, if you're employed at all, talk about field work, and talk about the project and or even the research paper that you write. That is number 3. Dear students, the other area we said is interpersonal skills. interpersonal skills. Which information do we expect here? Actually, you are talking about what can this person do? What can you do? Which ability do you have apart from the working experience and the educational background that you have? What have you been gifted to perform? And of which it could be an added advantage, by the way. For example, people are trained to do several things. Now, when you talk about you being able to operate different machines, like a computer, making different programs, that becomes one of the skills that you could have. Being able to drive a car for so long, let's say about 500 kilometers without a rest, that is the skill. Developing strategic plan, it is also a skill that others cannot. So try to think of yourself. What kind of skills do you have? And those are the one that you have to list here. Because these skills that I have given you, it's not that everybody can have it. But again, don't lie. You have to speak the truth. If you are able to do something, say it. If you are not, then of course you don't have to. I'll talk about this when it comes to the declaration part. Dear students, the followed area is about interests or hobbies. What do you like to do, especially after work? In simple other language, this interest or hobbies, we talk about extracurricular activities. What do you normally do when you don't have anything important that you want to perform? And which, of course, you just find yourself that you are already into that. That is the interest. The things that you always prefer to do. That you cannot pass a day without doing it. And or if it does, then it probably be 1 or 2 days. And when you think you are relaxed, then you have to think about, oh, I have missed this and this. That becomes one of your hobby. But a question, as we write curriculum vitae, we have to be very careful on the kind of hobbies that we are going to write. Because one of your hobby might be a bar for you to be employed in one of the organizations, probably where you send this CV. For example, there are people whose hobbies is to sleep. So sleeping is one of the interests of some of people. So if it is one of your hobby, then as you apply for, let's say, a driving post in one of the organization, then these people might not, or these people cannot think about you, because your hobby will, of course, make them fear. Your hobby will not make them take you as a right candidate, because considering the hobby that you have and the post that you are applying for, of course, there are two things which don't match. So at this point, you have people's hobby like watching TV programs. Other people's hobby is all to do with sports. Of course, it depends on what kind of sports. Others, football, some netball, others, basketball, you can name the rest of the other sports. Others have traveling as one of their other hobbies. And so you can mention as many as you could. It depends, as I say. We differ. Dear students, the followed area, it's about the referees, the people whom you think they would say good things about you once they are consulted for reference. You know, not everybody of us that can believe somebody. Different organization, different people. We need to have a backup person, a person of a certain caliber, that he or she can recommend you just in case you are missed, and or just in case you do something fishy. Then he or she could take that. So in that case, we are in fact advised to have 3 referees. Now, these referees, you cannot just write anybody, but there's a restriction that we are not supposed to include one of our relatives to be a referee. Because if you include one of your relatives, they say he or she might be biased just in case he or she is consulted. Because these referees, they are people who they are said to be trustful. But one among them is advised that you should include your academic advisor. Should be your professor or your teacher rather. Because that is a person, probably he or she knows you at the time during your education career. So you could think about how he or she can say about you when you are at school. So it is advised, one of the referees should be your academic advisor. And if possible, you could also think about other teachers, or even the head of your school could be your referee. And any other person that you think a reputable person. Don't think of choosing a referee, a person who is just a layman in the street. Make a referee who is or who has a title. At least those other people who are going to read your CV might be attracted or might give credit to you just because of the people who support you. But again, when you are writing these referees, you should make sure that they know you. And again, you should also consult them before you do that. Because you can know a person by his name, his phone number, address, and whatever, and you include him or her as your referee. And if you have not informed him or her, think about the time when they consult him and they ask him, do you know so and so and so? And then he says, no, I don't. What do you think is going to happen? You might not be a reliable person. So, as I said, you have to think about having 3 referees. Now, which information of your referee should you present? It has to begin with the name of that person, and followed by his or her physical address, and you have to include his or her telephone number, and if possible, and in today's world, of course, I might say, you cannot run away from writing his or her email address, believing that everyone has it. So this is the information that we think it has to be included when you are writing your referee. the name of your referee, the physical address. Remember, when you talk about physical address, I'm talking about P.O. Box, so and so, and the city or the place where he or she lives. The telephone number, you know it. And how do we write email address? Again, I showed it somewhere at the time when I was talking about personal particulars. So you'll have referee number 1, referee number 2, and referee number 3. That's it. And the final area of writing your curriculum vitae, it is that part of declaration, where at this point, the information that we expect to see under this area, it is a statement of declaration. That there should be a statement that it declares what you have written or the information that you have provided above, starting from personal particulars up to the referees. It's only the truth. That is the reason why we should have it here. That you should give a statement that shows that declares the truth of the information that you provided above. And just after that declaring statement, we expect to have your signature and, of course, the date on the other side. Now, having seen these 7 areas on which information in particular they have to be contained in under each of the area, then I am sure now that you can write a CV of your own by trying to follow these divisions. Following this, I would want you now to write a curriculum vitae of your own. You can think of the education level that you have, and that could be the highest. And even that person whose highest level of education is standard 7, he or she can develop a CV, and that could be his or her highest level of education. Now, let us look at this model question and see if you are able to do that or not. But absolutely, as I said, you can. Let's go for that. Our question is, imagine that you have graduated with a Bachelor in Laws degree and you wish to apply for a job at the High Court of Law. Write the curriculum vitae CV in bracket that you would attach in your letter. So this is a model question, as I said. What does the question demands? It, of course, does not ask you to write a letter, but rather it asks you to write a curriculum vitae. How can you go about this? You would start with personal particulars. You will go to educational background, and until you finally finishes with the declaration. And with that, you would find yourself, you can make or you can write a CV that it can be sent in any of the organization or any of the place where they would want it to have. And remember again, in a question, you cannot be provided with all such details. It is you that knows yourself, who you are, when were you born, your sex, your physical addresses, your telephone number. Who do you think can give these particulars? It is yourself. The education level that you have gone, it is you who knows. Where were you employed? Or what are you doing in the place where you have been employed? It's you who knows. What are your skills? Your hobbies? Who can you support? And who can act as a referee? And whether what you have said is true or not, it is you. And with this question, I would leave you to do it by yourself. And that marks the end of our lesson. Thank you very much for listening. Keep on watching Darasa Online.